a playlist original.
Gary, I hate to break it to you, but the world is on the brink of disaster. World crime is at an all-time high. And the only thing standing between order and chaos is us.
Hey, terrorists! Terrorize this!
And just what does this have to do with me?
Last week in Paris, we caught 4 terrorists with a weapon of mass destruction. We have to find out who sold it to them. Our only hope is to have somebody act like a terrorist. We need an actor. And they say you're the best.
I've got 5 terrorists going southeast on Bakalakadaka Street.
Soon every country will be in complete chaos.
To save the world from falling apart.
And so you see, the new world is inevitable.
It's what?
Inevitable.
One more time?
Inevitable! Things are inevitably going to change.
One team must pull together.
All right, let's move.
It's too soon to be having feelings for you.
Maybe. Feelings are feelings because we can't control them.
And turn the Earth's darkest moment.
Kapla! 3 more cities have fallen.
I can't keep it together! I'm not gonna let it end like this.
Into mankind's finest hour.
There's too many of them.
This isn't about sex, Gary. It's about trust.
All right, let's make this interesting.
Kia!
All right, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Back to the Blockbuster Presents Deep Dives, where we talk about some of your favorite movies, or maybe some movies you might have forgotten about. Very excited for this episode because we have a first-time guest on the Deep Dives. We have David Rosen of the Piecing It Together podcast. Thank you for joining me today for this one.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited for it because the cool thing about the deep dive spinoff is, it started out as one thing. It used to be, had another co-host on it. And we would pick the movies every other week. And then he couldn't do the show anymore. But everyone that listened to the deep dive show wanted me to keep that around because they liked it so much. They liked it because it was different from the main show, because the main show talks about industry news and it's about that. But the deep dives we get to jump into specific films and talk about them in a more specific way. So the cool thing about how we adjusted it is, whoever comes on the show, they get to pick what movie that they want to deep dive. And I know we're going to find out what movie you chose in just a bit, but I was really excited about it because we haven't talked about it on either show yet. I hadn't watched it in full. I realized since theaters, I was like, that's how long it had been. So I had seen pieces of it since then, but this was the first time in a while that I watched it in full. And then in addition to that, I was, in the climate that we're in now, I think the movie makes a lot more sense in so many ways now too. You guys will find out a little bit more what we're talking about when he reveals what movie it is. But first, I would like you to let everyone know a little bit about yourself and about your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one to get into. But my name is David Rose, and I host the Piecing It Together podcast, which is all about movies and what other movies might have inspired them. I've been doing it for a little over 6 years now, and we take each new movie as a jumping off point to get into other films that deal with similar themes or ideas or filmmaking styles. It's kind of like, if you like this movie, you should check out these movies. And
Nice.
I have different guests on from all over the world every week. I've also, over the last couple of years, started doing live episodes at movie theaters here in Las Vegas, which has
Very
been
cool.
really fun. We just did one on Deadpool and Wolverine last week, and it was a awesome crowd that was just super psyched to not only see the movie, but then just get right into talking about it right there in the theater afterwards. So it's been a really fun addition to the show. I'm also a music composer, which is where I kind of came from before getting into podcasting. But obviously, after 6 years, I'm both full time, so I stay very busy.
Nice. So with doing the episodes like kind of live from like the movie theater, is there a little chaos involved in that, or have you found a way to kind of make that a pretty easy thing to do?
Yeah, sometimes there's chaos. You never really know. I usually with my regular episodes, it's one-on-one, me and one guest. But
Right.
with these live ones, just to kind of, get like a whole fun experience, I have three guests on, and you never know, like, differing opinions, differing thoughts on, the particular films that we're covering or the films that come up as puzzle pieces. That's what we call a movie that might have inspired another movie. And so once we start getting into the conversation, you just really don't know what's going to happen. You also don't know what the audience is going to be like. And it really is just like a fun, different kind of format for expanding what the show could be.
Right.
And so far, it's gone great. I've done, I think, about 15 live shows now over the last couple of years.
Okay.
And lately, I've been doing 2 a month, and I hope to continue it that way.
Nice. I imagine Deadpool and Wolverine was pretty crazy, or was it? How was that doing it for that?
Yeah, it was definitely crazy. It was, first of all, it was like one of our most attended ones so far. I mean, obviously, everybody went
Right.
out to see that movie.
Yeah.
But then, hugely differing opinions on, whether the multiverse makes for a terrible movie or not.
Yeah.
That is something that can get a little heated at times. But we had fun and we had a great conversation.
That's good. I worked at Comic-Con over the weekend, and of course
Nice.
that movie was the center of attention for a few of the days. And yeah, it was a lot of a lot of excitement over it from people that saw the screening on Thursday, and then also the other side of that, which was it feels more like fan service and
Oh yeah.
feeding off of people's nostalgia more than an actual like film. So there was a lot of like interesting kind of conversations on it, but the cool thing about it was it created conversations. And if anything too, I mean, it's great to see a movie do well. At the beginning of the summer it was all doom and gloom box office wise, like
Yeah.
these films were underperforming, and in the last few weeks we haven't had that. So
Right.
it's good to see. I mean, even if you aren't into the MCU and all that stuff, I mean, I think we all benefit when these movies do well. So
Absolutely. And it's been a great summer. Like, we're seeing movies, stuff like Twisters that could have easily crashed and burned, ended up doing well
yeah.
and continue to do well, even with Deadpool and Wolverine taking over every major theater. So, yeah,
Yeah,
it's exciting.
I agree. All right, David. So tell everyone what movie you chose and why you wanted to deep dive it with us.
Well, I went back to 2004 for Trey Parker and Matt Stone's Team America World Police, which is a movie that I have been wanting to rewatch for a long time. I would say it was easily one of my favorite movies for, a couple of years there when it first came out. I was in my 20s at the time, and it was just about as funny as a movie could possibly be in, those few years.
Yeah.
I feel like in a I don't want to necessarily get political on your show or anything, but like I feel like in the
Oh, I know.
current climate and everything, and the world since Trump, like the whole South Park brand of humor, it kind of doesn't work as well anymore. And I certainly have fallen off of watching the show, which
Right.
was my favorite show for years and years, and especially right around this time when Team America came out. So I was wondering how it would hold up, because I was wondering if this was just going to be a cringe fest from beginning to end. Like, I can't believe I liked this back then. But it turns out it's just freaking hilarious. Even if a lot of it doesn't necessarily work in today's climate, it's still just funny is funny, and it's freaking hilarious.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what I kind of took from it too is that even if some of the political jabs may not work entirely today, there's
Mhm.
also so much other satire in it that does work. I mean, this is a satire of like action films, Hollywood. Like, there's a whole lot of things going on in it that even if some of the more political aspects of it maybe don't ring as true as they did in 2004, I think there's a lot you can find in it that still really works. And like you said, funny is funny. And I found myself, laughing my ass off at a lot of it.
Yeah.
I thought I told you off the line that it'd been in full. I saw it in theaters, and that was the last time I watched it in full. I had seen bits and pieces of it over the years, but I hadn't watched it in full until this. And it was a nice trip down memory lane with it. I mean, I kind of was when it was over, I was like, I can't believe I went that long without having watched it in full.
Right.
It came out on October 14th, 2004, so it'll be 20 years soon. And I don't know, I really enjoyed. I mean, this was kind of, they were in their Trey Parker and Matt Stone were in their sweet spot back during this time period.
Yeah.
And I was a big South Park fan. I don't like you. I don't watch it as much anymore.
Right.
I'm glad it's still thriving. There's a lot of those shows I don't watch like a lot anymore. Like I don't watch Simpsons anymore, but I'm glad it's still alive and thriving just for the sake of it. Family Guy is another one. But during this time, they really could do no wrong to me. I thought I just loved how irreverent they were and how willing they would go to places, even if it might offend some people.
Sure.
I think that's missing a bit from comedy now, and that's what I was like when I was watching it for this. I was like, one, I don't know if this gets made today, even involving puppets. I think whether it's animated or involves puppets, it takes a little bit of the like, oh, you can't do this, you can't be that part of the narrative away a little bit. But even the way it was presented in 2004, I don't think you could make this today, and it made me kind of miss comedies like this, because comedy in this day and age, the last few years, it's been really hard, I think, to do something truly funny, because everyone is a bit more easily offended, and it's hard to like. And I think that's why comedy like theatrically hasn't done as well as it used to. It's a little sad state of affairs when it comes to comedy. So this was a nice, refreshing look back, I thought, at how things used to be, and how people weren't afraid to kind of take chances when it came to comedy.
Absolutely.
I really miss. Yeah,
absolutely.
Really miss
and that's part of why when I was faced with the question of like, what movie are we going to cover on this, and I was thinking about the blockbuster theme of your show, and like I wanted it to be something that I genuinely love, but at the same time I'm not the biggest like straight up action guy, and you just don't see comedies that blow up the box office anymore. And this is kind of a bygone era. And nowadays comedies, they're still out there, but they definitely do not make big waves like this did back at the time, or for many years before. I mean, I host another, I produce and appear on mic on another movie podcast called Awesome Movie Year, and we dig deep back into like old years in movies, and it's crazy how many years like the number one movie at the box office, Three Men and a Baby, 1980, whatever that was. I mean, a movie like that is like, what's it going to make, like $20 million nowadays? If it even goes to theaters at all. The fact that it was the number one at the box office, it's just crazy. And so I feel like Team America is like right around the end of that. Like, I guess really we were talking already about superheroes, but like really as soon as Iron Man came out, what was that, 2009, I think, 7 or 9? Yeah, right around there. But right around there, it just kind of killed, it chopped off the blockbuster comedy, basically.
Yeah, it really did. I mean, like we, on the other show, we cover like movie anniversaries and stuff like that. And, sometimes we're not able to pick all the ones we want to do because we have so much other show to do. And we were going through the list, and we came across like something like Neighbors, and it was like, oh, it's 10 years since that movie came out. And it's like, I was like, oh, that's so crazy that movie's only 10 years old. That style of comedy is only 10 years old. That was a huge hit when it came out 10 years ago. And I don't think it entirely would be a huge hit today, and how like the climate has changed since then. And I used to think that comedy kind of changed in waves because of who was popular in comedy at the time. Like you would have, you had like the Will Ferrells and Vince Vaughns, and then you had like, the Judd Apatow guys. And then like, it seemed like you were like kind of transitioning people in and out. But now I just think it's just like the brand of comedy in general has just kind of not been what people want to see on the big screen. And it's because, a lot of it, I think, is neutered, and I don't know if it's. I think people are responding to it, with their lack of supporting some of those movies in theaters, because you can tell when something's been neutered and isn't what it once was. There's an audience, I think, that really wants that still. That is like, hey, like give me, I understand what comedy is. I'm not easily offended. I can be in on the joke and they'll
Yeah.
go for it. But there is the other pocket of the audience that it's like, that's too far, that's too much. That's why you get a lot of like, I think, revisionist history now when it comes to certain things that came out years ago or that was like lauded like years ago, and today it's like, oh, that just doesn't work today.
Yeah.
And I kind of wonder if like Matt Stone and Trey Parker find themselves in that position with some of their stuff. I think because, like I said, because like something like South Park is animated, they can get away with a lot of the things that they would do on that show. But I kind of wonder if they're faced with that now, as far as their approach to writing and how they tackle certain subjects. Because I know even back in the day with like Comedy Central, they gave them a lot of room to breathe, but they also kind of would check them a bit on what they could and couldn't do. But that would probably be even worse today, I would imagine.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult thing for these kinds of movies. And I mean, specifically to Trey Parker and Matt Stone, they're currently working on their first movie since this. And we should talk more about Team America, but it's a collaboration with Kendrick Lamar, I believe. And it sounds completely insane, and it definitely sounds like something that wouldn't fly nowadays, but they're just gonna go ahead and do it. And I'm really excited to see what exactly that is. But yeah, I mean, back to Team America. I mean, this was exactly the kind of comedy that was popular at the time, and they were the best at it at that time. And I remember when it first came out that they were taking a step away from, because they had already done a couple of like live action things, Cannibal the Musical and Orgasmo, but they were taking a step away from South Park animation to do a puppet based movie. It just sounded like the most amazing idea. Like, this is going to be the best thing ever. And it kind of was when it came out. It was just so incredibly inventive and hilarious and just anything goes funny. And also the craft of it all, which I know I've heard behind the scenes stories of Trey Parker saying it was just the worst experience in the world working with the puppets.
That's why I was like, I wonder, because you made that comment about like this, that new thing that they're doing, the new movie, it'll be the first one they've done since this. And I was wondering, I wonder if it's because I read too that they thought that this would be relatively easy to do, and then once they got into the production of it, they were like, this was like one of the hardest things, if not the hardest things that they attempted to do. And I wonder if that is what kind of soured them, or like, I want to take a break from doing anything move big screen wise for a while, because when I'm watching it, there is an inventiveness to it, right? Because on the one hand, you could say like, oh, this looks so ridiculously like cheap and like whatever, but then on the other hand too, it is pretty inventive to do it the way that they did it. And I think all things considered, even if there were behind the scenes issues with getting it done, and like because I know it came down to the wire as far as like the shooting of it and post-production and all that, it still, I think, holds up pretty well and looks pretty good, all things considered. Given all the issues behind the scenes. So I would, I still think it looks great. Even though I can imagine the frustrations of doing this production wise, and then also I know they faced a lot of issues with the MPAA with the movie. They were given an NC-17 a lot, and primarily based on one scene in particular. So I mean, and this is not something they're strangers to. They dealt with it when they did the South Park movie as well, going back and forth with them. So I mean, I'm sure these are creative guys that really just want to be funny and like kind of flex their creative muscles a bit. And it has to be kind of stifling when whatever the issue is, whether it's production issues or dealing in post production with an association like the MPAA. It has to be difficult when all you want to do is just like be creative, be funny, and get your ideas out there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's got to be a really difficult thing, and yeah, like you said, it does still look good. I only have the DVD. I know they just came out with a new 4K of this in the last month or two or something. I have the DVD, and even that, it still looked really good and all kind of held up as far as visually is concerned. I was curious, like, just as like a kind of on the spot question, but like, what do you think is like the thing that wouldn't fly the most from this movie nowadays?
I mean, I'm trying to think of like, there's a lot in it that I'm not sure would fly today.
I know.
I mean, Hollywood itself doesn't like when you poke fun at it. So
It's
a
true.
lot, and they poke fun at Hollywood a lot. There was, it's just what it's one thing I'm thinking about. What do they call? They're not a part of SAG, so Alec Baldwin is a part
Right.
of
The
the
Film
FA,
Actors Guild.
Actors Guild,
Yeah.
the FAG, and like guys, you know what the FAG would spell. So and then members of that included like Alec Baldwin. I think George Clooney was a part of it too in the movie
Yep.
as well. I think some of that might not. Oh yeah, Matt Damon, who
Of
only
course.
only gets to say his name. And there's what's funny was like when I was rewatching when you haven't watched something in a while, but like you have either that kind of total recall to like certain jokes, or you have friends that, as it turns out, quote things like this movie like
Mhm.
more than you realize. So like the Matt Damon thing, the way he says his name, my
Yeah.
friends quote a lot. Of course, America, fuck yeah, is another thing that my friends
Amazing.
quote a lot. And this movie came out during a time when a lot of my friends, particularly the girls, really into the musical Rent, so they don't particularly love the spoof of Rent that they do, like the little Broadway everybody has AIDS thing.
Yeah.
Some of my other friends really did enjoy it. I think it's a lot of that stuff that wouldn't fly. But like, is there one scene in particular that you think would be totally off limits today, that you think that they wouldn't
You know what, the one
go?
for me that I remember just how amazing, like I remember thinking that this should win Oscars at the time when it came out. And now I'm watching it and seeing Kim Jong-il in this, and just that caricature by essentially two white guys who made this
Yeah.
movie. Like I'm just like my head in my hand watching this, like, Jesus Christ, But
Yeah, they really do stereotype how he sounds.
yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
It's
By two
it's
white men.
yeah, it's touchy, but he's such a great character, though. Even if you could point out how kind of awful that is in retrospect, like he is
Yeah.
a wonderful character. His song is amazing, and
He's just so ronery, man.
he is.
That's why he's so that's why he's so angry.
That's why he's so mad all the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You mentioned America Fuck Yeah. The songs in this movie are just incredible. I think that might be its biggest like lasting legacy, that song, but also Freedom Isn't Free
Yeah.
is hilarious.
Yeah.
The Pearl Harbor Sucks song is hilarious.
Yeah.
Of course, Montage, which was also on South Park. And Only a Woman, which I had forgotten about until it started playing. That was like my jam when I was like 24.
Yeah.
Like, that was the best song
Really
in the
good.
world. It's so good.
It had, it's the music is good, and I had to, because I actually got this movie from Paramount in like a four they sent like a 4K review copy with
Nice.
South Park bigger, longer, and uncuts, and I hadn't watched that movie in forever either. So when we were getting ready for this, even though we were going to talk about South Park, I just watched them both in a row just because I was like, they're both here, I might as well. The South Park, the music in that movie is really good. There's some great songs in that. So it was hard for me, especially because I watched it back to back. I was like, oh, like some of the music, some of the songs in South Park in that movie fare a little bit better than this. But once I watched some of the scenes again, and just in preparation for this, because we were supposed to do it last week for everyone listening, but something came up and we couldn't do it. The music, the songs detached from like my viewing of South Park, they played a lot better having just watched them just isolated without piggybacking off of the movie the way I watched it before. And they actually do, I mean, in their own right, are pretty memorable. And I would say, like, I think some people even quote American Fuck Yeah, not even knowing that it's from this.
I think so. This is one of yeah, it's one of those movie references that people don't even realize that it comes from a movie. I think definitely that it has transcended at this point, and it is just such a funny song, and it's perfect too for the kind of like action movie that it is spoofing. It's just the perfect song. It's just so damn good.
Yeah, I agree. Just so for anyone that doesn't know, why don't you tell them a little bit about what Team America is about?
So essentially, terrorists are threatening our way of life here in America, and so Team America is like a super secret, special agency of basically action heroes. They're like straight out of a Michael Bay action movie, which is name checked within the movie. But
Yeah.
and they are here to carry out the missions that have to go unsanctioned because they're too dangerous or whatnot. And so it turns out that Kim Jong-il, as we mentioned, is the big super bad who is kind of funding all the terrorists to create chaos in the world. And so Team America have to go after them. And they have this new upstart rookie who they hire because they need an actor who would be good enough to pretend that they are a terrorist. And so they go to Broadway where all the best actors are. And they get this young actor to portray a Middle Eastern terrorist, even though he's a Midwest white boy, blonde.
Caucasian, yeah.
And and you can imagine where things go from there. And just nonstop, like over the top action comedy. And as we have mentioned before, all done through the magic of stop motion animation puppets. And it is an incredibly put together film, considering all of the trouble they had behind the scenes to like actually pull this off. Because as we know, puppets are not easy to work with. And they really went all out with this thing and made it like the ultimate kind of puppet movie.
Yeah. For those wondering, it says that the movie was produced using a crew of about 200 people, which sometimes required 4 people at a time to manipulate a marionette. And that, I mean, I don't, it's funny because like one of the blurbs said that the idea sounded easier. The concept was easier than it was to execute. But I feel like if I got on that set and was like, all right, we have all these things that we're trying to do, that it would like right away be like, all right, this is not going to be as easy as we thought it was going to be. Again, they make it look as good as it can, but I mean, I imagine, watching the movie is probably more entertaining than making it.
I'm sure. Yeah. And that's always kind of factored into the South Park sense of humor too. Like things that like, oh, it looks like crap. That's fine. That's part of the joke. So it like kind of fits right into their personalities.
Yeah, I agree. And as far as the action film element of it, I mean, it does kind of satirize action films. They said that the inspiration, they took from a lot of different ones. It was Top Gun. They took some stuff from SWAT, Pearl Harbor being another big one as well, and a little bit from Alien. But they said that there were a lot of influences on at least the action aspect of the movie, which actually, in all honesty, I mean, I'm not saying that it's gonna reinvent the wheel of action, but for action involving puppets, marionettes, it's not bad at all. Actually,
absolutely, yeah. And there was a show which I've never actually seen, Thunderbirds, which had this kind of style with the puppets, and I know that they took a lot of inspiration from that as far as the actual look of the marionette dolls themselves. And then, I mean, you mentioned Michael Bay, of course. I was also thinking of Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back as something that had just come out a few years earlier and really satirized Hollywood and just how, ridiculous actors and Hollywood people can be.
Yeah. And honestly, the lead character, our Broadway star, is how you would expect him to be. The stereotype is, I mean, it's played very well. And I love how the cockiness of that character is played very well, but then in movies like this, I'm always surprised when there is a little bit of heart and some earnestness in like some of the characters and stuff like this. And I think that's why for me, like a lot of these movies end up working, because you could easily make a offensive kind of raunch fest, and that would probably work for some people. But when good writers can find like the heart in a lot of this madness, I can respect that a bit more, because I think that's a lot harder to do, because there's so much ridiculousness going on around them that when you can find that, I mean, that is something that's pretty special. And I think they do kind of find that in a lot of these kind of ridiculous characters that are in the movie. They even make Kim Jong-il kind of sympathetic in his own right, which is interesting too. But I think that's why a lot of it works, because it's not just the joke. I think it has a bit more layers than you would probably expect it to, and that kind of surprised me a bit more when I was watching it for this. I was like, oh, like they weren't. I mean, I think really good writers like them know that you have to have like a little bit of substance in there in order for the more outlandish stuff to kind of land as well too.
Yeah, I think one of the really impressive things about this movie is, to that point, the whole monologue about dicks, pussies, and assholes.
Yeah.
It really sells the themes of the movie in a way that it
Yeah.
really should not, because it's just gross out, ridiculous humor. But at the same time, it works so well, and it actually makes a big, wonderful point.
It is a really good point.
Yeah.
I was just amazed by, like, the writing on this. Like I said, this is like them at their peak, I think.
Yeah.
And it really, they're firing on all cylinders. I kind of, I wish I was more in tune with what South Park and stuff was like now, because I
Mhm.
haven't watched it in so long, and I don't know kind of where their comedic flavor is nowadays, because I haven't really watched the show in a long time. But I do remember during this period, I mean, people being equally like loving their stuff and then being equally offended by
Sure.
half the things they were doing. I do remember the time when this came out, though. Like, my friends, even though it was coming from the guys that did South Park, they were so into South Park that, some of the other stuff that Trey Parker and Matt Stone did, they weren't like are automatically game to go see or
Mhm.
be involved with. I know, like, I had a friend that actually didn't watch this for a really long time because he was like, "Oh, that's not South Park. I'm not interested." And I
Hmm.
actually told him we were covering it for this, and he was like, "It was crazy." He's like, "I watched that movie like 2 weeks ago, and I hadn't. I wish I hadn't avoided it when it came out, because I avoided it because I was like, no, I'm a South Park guy. That's the only thing I enjoy that they're doing." And like, he's like, the previews didn't entice me or anything like that. And he was like, I was so wrong, because like, it's so in their wheelhouse and works so very well, and um allows them to be creative in a very different way compared to what they were doing on South Park. There's
Yeah.
still the same concept of having, like, in the case of South Park, we have rough animation, and then with this you have, like, the really the rough production of marionettes and puppeteering and all that. But they were just my friend was just surprised by how strong the writing was, but he was like, I shouldn't have been surprised, because they were doing great stuff on South Park around that time too. So those sensibilities could easily transfer over to something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you've ever seen the Book of Mormon, the musical that they
Yeah.
did. That is just absolutely incredible as well, and that's like the last non-South Park thing they've done, which I hope they eventually make a movie adaptation of it. Although, as we've talked about, a lot of their stuff wouldn't fly
Oh, yeah.
nowadays, but it's so good, and the songs also, just like the songs in Team America, are just incredible. But yeah, like I said, I haven't really watched much South Park lately. There it's not that I necessarily like don't like it. It's just that there was like episode after episode where it was like, it's fine. It's they kind of settled into a groove, and it just wasn't
Yeah.
really as biting anymore. And it just didn't seem like it works in a kind of post-Trump world anymore, which is part of why I
Yeah.
was worried about watching this. I was like, is all this terrorist stuff gonna like just be like, ugh, God, or is it gonna still be funny? And luckily it was still funny, and it really held up. But it's just hard that everything is just kind of so stupid now. Like, there's no there's no real entry point to write comedy about it. At least this kind of
No.
comedy.
No, you're right. And like, and I think earlier you mentioned, like, you don't want to get too political. You can say whatever you want on the show, and you're
Mhm.
completely open to say whatever you want. I think what I took from watching this in this time frame is the movie still works and it's still funny, but a lot of what I was watching, I had a mindset of like imagining what it was like when it came out in 2004, which made it a bit more funnier for me. I think for if a new audience member were to watch this today, I wonder if it, and they had no exposure to it in 2004, I wonder if it would be as funny to them, because I've been telling, I think a lot of people have said this, but the world we're living in now feels like a movie. It doesn't feel real. It
Right.
feels very,
Yeah.
it feels like something that someone wrote. It does not feel authentic real life at all. So I wonder if, like, the ridiculousness of the real world would make a movie like this less funny to someone who is just discovering it today, because we have something so real but outlandish playing out in
Hmm.
the world that we're living in. So I mean, I kind of had that concern too, like, would the movie land as well in the current climate that we're in, because the current climate I mean, it feels like something that was manufactured by a Hollywood studio
Yeah, it kind of
and, not,
does.
and not
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, how could it possibly be real life? But it sure is. And yeah, I think one of the things about this movie is the kind of really the taking down of America and like, America, fuck yeah, that whole mindset has really taken over to the, the point of like the apathy nowadays when it
Yeah.
comes to like the political process, and that there's no way for anything good to come of voting, of military, of presidencies, anyone in power. And
Yeah.
a lot of that is true, a lot of that is correct, but it's difficult to make jokes about stuff like that now because I feel like everybody is just so kind of, feels hopeless about everything.
Yeah.
2004 was just a very different time where it was like, yeah, we could look at this stuff and just think it was all stupid, but it just kind of felt like it was like, somebody will fix it. Now we know nobody's going to fix it,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. We're in like crisis mode, just like,
Yeah.
hoping for the best,
Yeah.
expecting the worst, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
I also like the aspect in the writing and all that, even though the movie also sends up, Hollywood and all that too. I also like on the other end of that is that they have like, their hope of winning is being placed on this actor who is, who is very much a part of that, that whole thing that they're also kind of making fun and taking down. So I love that they do both aspects because like they have. I mean, I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone, even though maybe even when they started South Park, they may not have felt like this. Like they may not have felt a part of like the elite when they created something like that. But
Sure.
eventually, like any writer, producer, director, actor, once you're a part of something really successful, no matter how much you want to maybe not be that, like distance yourself from being a celebrity or being famous or being well known, it's going to happen. And it happened to them once South Park became truly, truly popular. And I think they tried for a bit to resist that, but
Yeah.
it's hard, the more successful something becomes, the more well known you become, even if you are a bit more behind the scenes. And they had the benefit for a bit of being behind the scenes until they started doing a few more live action things, like basketball and
Yeah.
Mission Orgasmo and stuff like that. But they had that benefit of being like hidden a bit, and eventually they couldn't be. I mean, now they are very wealthy men because of what they created,
Yeah.
and I wonder at a certain point if it feels weird for them to kind of send up these kind of like Hollywood tropes, even in 2004, because they were very successful by this point.
Yeah.
And I think that's why there is a need to kind of make fun of it, but then also hang all their hopes on this one person who is, doesn't have any insurmountable skills at all other than he's an actor and good looking. And
Yeah.
that's who they're putting their hopes on to kind of save the world. So I think it kind of also encompasses this kind of love-hate relationship with the industry as well. That
Yeah.
also kind of permeates throughout the movie too.
I definitely think so. Yeah, for sure. I was also thinking of that the new Eminem album, The Death of Slim Shady.
Shady.
Like, he's trying to cancel himself, whatever. Like it's all very kind of running out of like an idea of what to say about this world because you're successful and there's really not what you don't want to retire, but at the same time you want to just you don't really know what to do anymore with that character that you've created for yourself. And I feel like Trey Parker and Matt Stone, I mean, I can't wait to see what they eventually do, but it would be hard for any show to go as long as South Park did and stay like relevant.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Honestly, you see that with stuff like The Simpsons. I mean, it's been on forever, right? And like I said, I don't. I mean, everyone knows of the golden age of that show. There's a sweet spot where it's probably one of the funniest things you've ever watched on television. And then after that, it's been on for God, how many seasons? Like deep
40
in his
something.
deep in his 30s at least, and eventually you're gonna run out of ideas. Now that being said, even though I haven't watched it in years, if I found out tomorrow that they were canceling it, I would be upset because it's such a staple of pop culture and all that. And same thing with South Park. I think too, it became its own staple of pop culture as well. So I the Eminem comparison is very on point because at a certain point, he got a lot of mileage out of being Slim Shady after out of having the crazy relationship with Kim, and then the situation like and raising their daughter, and then being from where he is from, and then after like 2, 3, 4 albums, now you're a superstar, so you can't really like be that guy anymore. Like now we know that like no matter how hard you try to like fight it, you're successful, you're rich, you're definitely not the same guy that was like writing rhymes, on 8 Mile and all that stuff too. You're definitely a different person now.
Sure.
And I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone that's a similar boat with them. I mean, I think they try to resist that. Yeah, I think they were even trying to do that when they were doing this, and it's kind of hard because I think you still want to be one of the cool kids, and like this, and I think they probably feel they can't be the cool kid if they are a part of that system too.
Yeah.
In some way, which is why they try to like make fun of it and also destroy it at the same time.
Sure.
And you get a lot of that in Team America, but you also get a lot of like this kind of like love for it too, where they don't want to totally dismantle it because it's also their bread and butter.
Yes,
so like
exactly.
but I think they find the right balance though. It's not one is more heavy-handed than the other. I think they find a good way of because we always say this with my group of friends. We razz each other all the time, and it's one of those things. It's like, hey man, if I don't like make fun of you a little bit, that means I'm not comfortable enough with you. That means I don't really like you that much because I don't feel comfortable enough with you to go there with you. And I think that's kind of like what it's like for them. Like they, with Hollywood, they get to kind of make fun of it because there's things they don't love about it, but there's also things they do like about it, and that's how they're able to make fun of it so well. And most of the stuff they do touch on is pretty accurate. I mean, I think they mostly hit more than they miss, and even in this, because like I was, like when you're watching a movie like this, I mean, it's 98 minutes, so it's like pretty much the perfect length for a comedy. I think an hour and 90 minutes is like on point for a comedy because eventually the jokes start to run out, and they throw a lot at the wall, but I think most of it sticks than not.
Absolutely. To that point about the having a reverence for the things that they're making fun of, I gave this movie a 4.5 stars on Letterboxd, and the reason I held off that last half a star from a 5 is because I was thinking back about it, and I think the reason we all collectively decided that Michael Bay sucked was because of this movie. And Michael Bay rules. Michael Bay just absolutely rules. And I am just so mad at myself for just buying into that and spending the last 20 years just kind of be like, Michael Bay, he's lame, just explosions. I just rewatched Bad Boys 2 before the new one came out. It is like the best movie ever. And he has so many other great movies. That's why I cut that half a star.
Yeah, I think what they choose, I mean, it's interesting because Pearl Harbor is another movie that kind of gets poked at a bit here,
and I'm not going to defend that one.
But, right, so there's that. So granted, I think they had they were given enough ammunition with something like that to make fun of it. I agree with you though. I've always been like, everyone's like, oh, he's only good at like blowing shit up. I was like, but it's an art to blowing shit up. And I think that he has perfected that. So yeah, like you, I watched Bad Boys 2 before the new one came out. Even though it's long, it has no business being as long as it is, but like it holds up pretty well. The Rock is another good one that's really good from him. I mean, he's made some pretty good stuff. Now I won't, but like any director, not every director has made clunkers, but he's gonna have some in there that are like, oh, that's not so great.
Sure,
but I mean, back when this movie came out, he was a very easy target to make fun of. Particularly, I think with something like Pearl Harbor, which made it easy to be made fun of in something like this, is because you could tell they were going for Pearl Harbor being like a Titanic. That was the vibe they were trying to go for. Like, let's take this like big historical event and kind of shape this really like fictional love story around this said historical event. And Michael Bay probably wasn't the best person to direct. Now he directed the hell out of that one scene in particular. It's good, but you don't, when you think sweeping romantic love story, you don't think Michael Bay.
Absolutely.
And I think that kind of made him right for being made fun of by these guys for this. But I've never signed on the narrative that he's awful, because I think I don't think, I hope I don't get ribbed for saying this, I don't think someone like Scorsese could direct like action the way that he does. And I mean that as like it's like it's I think there is an art to it, and but he is very easy to make fun of because he does make the same type of movie a lot. And you're watching a Michael Bay movie when you're watching it. There's a lot of like explosions and slow-mo and a lot of close-up on girls' butts, and he directs like he's a 16-year-old boy. Like if you gave like a 16-year-old boy $200 million to make a movie, that's the movie that they would make. But I think those sensibilities are okay to enjoy, but
100%.
But also, I mean, leaves yourself open for a little bit of satire, which I think is fine.
Absolutely.
I completely fine in this. I wanted to ask you about so the MPAA came down the movie hard for one scene in particular involving puppets engaged in sexual activity. I wanted to ask you how you felt about it because they actually went back and forth a lot with them, and they were so frustrated because they were basically like they're puppets. They don't even have any like body parts that we're using to simulate this meeting. Yes, the positions are like they are simulating are sexual, but like it's a joke and it's satire. It should be funny, and they were feeling like one of the quotes from Trey Parker said it's a back and forth with the board. They said it can't be as many positions, so we cut out a couple of them. We love the golden shower, but I guess they said no to that. But I just love that. But I just love that they have to watch it. Seriously, can you imagine getting a videotape with just a close up of a puppet asshole and you have to watch it? So at a certain point, they think they were just like having fun with just being like, yeah, you're gonna cut our thing down to whatever, but you have to still watch it in order to cut it down. But at the end of the day, I thought it was so silly that they had an issue with it because, again, it involves two puppets. It's not real people. Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I've heard other directors have issues with the MPAA. Wes Craven was another one when he was doing Scream that had to go back and forth until I guess one of the Weinsteins, not Harvey, I always forget the other guy, the other Weinstein, his Bob Weinstein, until he told the MPAA like, hey, this is like a spoof. It's satire. It's not really like a horror movie. And then once they watched it like that, they were like, oh. And then they gave it an R rating. So I don't know how their minds work, but I was wondering how you felt about them coming down so hard on a scene that is so clearly, I don't think they should have entirely come down hard on. Even with, and I know they cut out a lot of urination stuff and defecating stuff from the scene too,
which is on my DVD, by the way. I don't know on the Blu-ray. Yeah, but
so and I don't know. What do you think their issue was with it? And was it silly of them to have an issue with it?
Well, we're still the same way in this country. Like everybody is just so hung up on sex stuff and they just, they get so scared about it and it's so stupid and so ridiculous. And I don't remember if it was part of that interview or if it was something else. Maybe it was a South Park thing, but I think I remember Trey Parker at some point saying something about putting extra in just so it would get cut down to the amount he actually wanted,
Right.
And that might have been something in the South Park movie or it was something in this movie. I'm not quite sure, but I mean, it's just so ridiculous that they would want to cut that out. It's two toys doing fake sex stuff. Like it's just so dumb.
Yeah, and it's not erotic at all whatsoever. No. I mean, it's clearly done as a joke. I guess the original scene was supposed to be a minute and a half, and they cut it down to 50 seconds. And I do think it's funny that the defecating and stuff, they said that's what kids would do with their Barbie and Ken toys. I don't know if that's true or not. I didn't have any Barbies or Ken, so and I don't know if that was something kids did with their dolls. But that's what they said that was the joke. But yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous to me that, I mean, I'm just imagining a bunch of old stuffy men sitting in a room watching this and just being like, no, that's gotta go. And but having a serious discussion about it as if it was two like real people doing it on screen. Yeah. And that's why I just like, I like the fact that I don't think there's any precedent for it to be like, oh, like we need to cut this down because this was not going to be a children's film by any means. It was always going to be like an R-rated movie. Kids weren't going to go see it, but to like push it to like to an NC-17 because of this seems so, on brand for them, but it's also very ridiculous as well because it's just so outlandish and over the top. It's like, how could you even take it seriously enough to be like, oh, like this is too much. You need to cut some of this down.
Right. So dumb. I wonder, my favorite filmmaker is Charlie Kaufman, and in his film Anomalisa in 2015, there was a puppet sex scene in that. I wonder if the MPA gave him a whole lot of trouble. Yeah. I wonder if they were still 10 years later, if they were like just going nuts over puppet sex.
Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, I can't like again. I'm imagining a bunch of old stuffy men in a
Yeah.
room just for like, nope, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, a lot of people are parodied in the film. We mentioned Alec Baldwin, we mentioned Matt Damon. More people. There's a lot. The Michael Moore one actually cracked me up too. Just
Oh yeah.
yeah, just like it's just figuring out eating. Was like eating a hot dog or something while
Yeah.
he's complaining. Tim Robbins, Helen Hunt, George Clooney, Liv Tyler, Martin Sheen, Susan Sarandon, Janine Garofalo, Samuel L. Jackson, Danny Glover, Ethan Hawke, Kim Jong Il, Tony Blair, Queen Elizabeth II, Fidel Castro, Peter Jennings. There are others. I'm just naming a few of them, and almost all of them are killed in in a lot of violent ways. I thought it was interesting. Some people reacted fondly. Alec Baldwin thought that it was funny, and he had no issues with it. Sean Penn, they said that he sent them an angry letter. Invited them to tour Iraq with him, ending with the words "fuck you."
That sounds like something Sean Penn would do for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like in the movie, he's portrayed making outlandish claims about how happy and utopian Iraq was before Team America showed up.
Mhm.
George Clooney and Matt Damon were friends with Stone and Parker. And Clooney has said that he would have been insulted if he wasn't included in the movie. And Damon, who's portrayed as a bit dumb in the film, when he was asked about it in 2016, he said he was confused by the betrayal, given that he was already known as both a screenwriter and an actor. So he doesn't know why he was portrayed as like a simpleton. And it's funny in other media, like Family Guy, in terms of like Ben Affleck and Matt Damon, they make Ben Affleck the simpleton, the one who was like getting high while Matt Damon was writing all of Good Will Hunting. Were there any parodies of real people that you thought worked more than others, or any ones that stood out to you as some that are particularly funny?
I thought they were all pretty equally great. I thought it was funny that Susan Sarandon, for some reason, gets like a big bulk of the jabs. Like, your skills are fading with age, Miss Sarandon.
Yeah.
Like why did Susan Sarandon get that? But you know, and then of course Matt Damon. But yeah, I think they were all like fairly equal. I mean, that's part of the whole, you know, South Park idea that everybody gets it.
Yeah. The full quote from Matt Damon says, "I was always bewildered by that, and I never talked to Trey and Matt about that. And incidentally, I believe these two are geniuses, and I don't use that word lightly. I think they are absolute geniuses, and what they've done is awesome. And I'm a big fan of theirs, but I never quite understood that one." And then they said later that it had nothing to do with his personality. They said after they saw the puppet that was made for him, they gave him that personality because it looked kind of mentally deficient.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. And I did not know that Kim Jong Il was a film buff. Apparently, he is. He never commented publicly about his depiction in the movie. Although shortly after its release, North Korea asked Czech Republic to ban the film, and the country refused, saying that the North Koreans have been rebuffed in their effort to undermine the Czech Republic post-communist era freedom. The filmmaker acknowledged this in the DVD extra that, and Joe Lee says that he sings "I'm So Romery" in the film himself. And then, of course, Michael Moore is depicted as a fat hot dog eating glutton who partakes in suicide bombing and is referred to as a giant socialist weasel. Stone is saying the reason for this portrayal in an interview. He said, we have a very specific beef with Michael Moore. I did an interview and he didn't mischaracterize me or anything. I said in Bowling for Columbine, but what he did do was put this cartoon titled A Brief History of the United States of America, written by Moore, animated and directed by Harold Moss, right after me, that made it look like we did that cartoon. So there was no personal thing. Yeah. I don't know. I always wondered that I would, you know, even going with South Park, I feel like some people who are in on stuff like that, like if you're being made fun of on the most popular show, like at the time on TV, or one of the most popular shows on TV, you kind of embrace that and go with it. I know there are other celebrities that did not love being made fun of on any of their projects. Tom Cruise being one of them on South Park. I know Jennifer Lopez didn't like being made fun of on South Park as well. But I don't know. In my opinion, if you're not fully in on, if you're not self-aware enough to, you know, like, hey, like one, it's an exaggeration of who the world thinks I am. For the most part.
Yeah.
Now you can very well be that way, and that's something that you need to, like, you know, have a conversation with yourself about.
Yeah, sure.
But for the most part, you know, it's like I think most people get satire and spoofing and know that, hey, like, you know, it's not supposed to be entirely. It's like it's kind of based on a version of like what the world thinks the situation is, or what the world thinks the person is. So, I don't know. just have a bit more sense of humor about things. I think that's what's kind of missing in today's day and age, that people have kind of lost that sense of humor a bit.
Everyone's so
unfortunate.
concerned with their image and everything, and so they can't just like let loose a little bit and just have some fun with it. And yeah, I mean, people should just be having a blast with that. I always think of Weird Al when like 99% of artists are like, hell yeah, I want Weird Al to parody my song. But then every once in a while you get that one person who's just like, no way, that's not cool.
Coolio was one of them at first. I know Amish because like Gangsta's Paradise is such a, for him was such a pivotal song and important, and he thought that shouldn't be made fun of. I don't know if that changed later in his life before he passed away, but I know at the time that he was not too pleased. But then like you have people like Michael Jackson who were like pleased with like some of that stuff, like in the 80s, like with Eat It and fat that. So like you're surprised with like who thinks it's funny. Like I would think Michael Jackson would be like no, but like he was like apparently in on jokes.
He was totally in. Yeah,
totally in on it. Looking at Team America, were there any scenes in particular that stood out to you that were particularly funny, that like kind of like you just couldn't help but like kind of burst up at?
I mean, there's so many, and we did talk about a bunch of different stuff. One scene I do want to mention that the first time I saw it, I seriously almost died, was when Kim Jong-il releases his panthers and they're just house cats.
House cats, yeah.
And that's genius because of obviously the size of these marionette dolls. Like it's just perfect. I like being a big cat and dog person. That just has always killed me.
That's hilarious. There are a few that I love the initial joke when they're recruiting him and they go to go get him, and he's basically saying to come with him in his limo, and he kind of thinks it's going to be like some weird kind of like casting couch situation where he's like and then as soon as he gets to the car, he asks him to he's like, now you're gonna like suck my dick or something like that. I thought that was pretty funny. I love like the very awful to make him look like he has to fit in with them, and they have like this awful like patchwork like beard that they put on the marionette, and like, I think they kind of like darken the face a little bit, but it's so obvious that he's not one of them at all, and and they start like talking to him, and they're like, oh, he's gonna screw this up right away, like this is not gonna work. And then he of course it does work. I thought that was pretty funny. And also it's not like a pivotal scene at all, but I love certain jokes that linger, and it's when he's drunk at the bar and he's like stumbling around and like getting out of the bar. That joke lingers on, or that moment lingers on a lot longer than it should, but I couldn't stop laughing because one, the puppet looks ridiculous, just like
just falling
back and forth and falling over. And I couldn't stop laughing, and then of course it ends with like a lot of projectile
yes,
vomit.
Which is amazing too. I'll throw a really hilarious moment when our main character and Lisa, the blonde girl that he eventually has sex with, when they're kind of expressing their feelings for one another, but she has all this trauma, and she's like, I just don't think I could lose another person. I'll only have sex with you if you could promise that you'll never die. And then he grabs her and he says, I promise I will never die. It's just a great line.
You know what's interesting too, though, because we kind of brought it up with like saying that the movie has heart, like the dialogue exchanges between them about her feelings, and then like it's her stuff is written seriously. I mean, I know there's a sense of like it's kind of poking fun a little bit at characters like that in films who are like, I can't lose someone else, but also it seems like it's also written from a really genuine place as well. And so that's why I think it's so funny that it can work, as like a nice pivotal moment between these two characters, but also you get the humor of like, I think that's why that joke lands at the end when he's like, I promise you I'll never die, because it's like once that you're like, no, you can't promise someone that. but sometimes in action movies or any like any like high romance kind of movies, there is dialogue like that where it's like, okay, I know that's supposed to sound like romantic and like you're making a promise, but like you can't really promise someone that you're never gonna die. Like that doesn't work
So
like
ridiculous.
at all. But yeah, like I said, the writing though, I mean, they really found like a perfect blend of what they were trying to do. Which is like, and that's hard in comedy too, I think, to really make all these aspects of it work. it would be easy for them to fall flat somewhere. And I think they actually, they do a good job of like juggling and wearing a lot of hats. And
Yeah.
it's not an easy thing to do. And, uh, hats off to them because it's difficult. And, this easily could have been something that could have landed like completely flat. I mean, I guess granted using the puppets, there's going to be humor there on some level. You're going to laugh at something, I guess, because of the way the thing looks and like the situations. But again, the writing and stuff has to be funny. I mean, I know when they were making it, they had found that they had written stuff in the script that once they got on set and it was being said and they were watching how the puppets and stuff were being moved and how they were creating things, certain jokes just didn't land the same way, like on set compared to how they were writing on the page. So they were adjusting things based on how they thought the puppets looked, how they moved. Like they were really changing things on the spot, which kind of added more to how long the production was, and probably in comparison to how easy they thought it might be.
Yeah, especially with that quick South Park turnaround time that they're famous for.
Yeah, and that's something that they're used to too. Like, that had to be another difficult part of it. They're used to cranking out these things quick, and it's proved to be not that easy for them to do.
Yes.
But I think the end result makes up for it.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
It really, I think it still holds up really well. I was surprised to find out. I think they said the movie has a bit of a cult following now, but when it came out, it opened to $12.1 million. It ranked third behind Shark Tale and Friday Night Lights when it opened. It ended up grossing $50.9 million worldwide. 32.8 million of that was from the US. So it wasn't like a major hit, but not a flop either. It had a $32 million budget, so it matched that here in the States. But they said the movie has gone on to have a pretty sizable cult following in the years since its release. There was one review. Roger Ebert, who a lot of people, he respectful movie critic. He gave the movie 1 out of 4 stars and wrote, "I wasn't offended by the movie's content so much as by its nihilism, and was critical of the film's sneer at both sides approach, comparing it to a cocky teenager who's had a couple of drinks before the party. They don't have a plan for who they want to offend, only an intention to be as offensive as possible." It seems like he believes that there was no rhyme or reason to what they were doing. I don't really see that, but I mean, how do you feel about?
Well, it's really funny that that's what Ebert said, because that's exactly what I was worried about rewatching it. I thought this movie was going to be exactly what he just said, and I don't agree with him at all. I think that they always have that both sides are stupid sense of humor, which it's just part of what they do. But I think that there's so much funny here, regardless of that it does not take away from the movie whatsoever.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And you know what? Sometimes he wasn't always on the mark. When it came to things, he particularly with horror movies. I know he was very wishy-washy with those. They also said before Team America was released, statements were released by a senior Bush administration official condemning the film. Upon receiving the news, the duo called and found it was instead a junior staffer, causing Stone to quip, "What is it, junior or senior? What are we talking about here? Who knows? It might have been the janitor." The two eventually decided it was free publicity, which they were fine with. Some media outlets interpreted the film's release on October 15th to be in theaters before the November elections was a deliberate move by the studio. Parker said the release date had nothing to do with the elections, and the date was pushed back as far as possible due to production delays. So that makes sense because they were taking a while to do it. But they had to return to South Park by October 20th. To complete work on that show. And also the National Review Online named the film number 24 in its list of the best conservative movies. Brian C. Anderson wrote, "The film's utter disgust with airheaded left-wing celebrity activism remains unmatched in popular culture." Political and social commentator Andrew Sullivan considers the film brilliant in its skewering of both the left and right's approach on terrorism. Sullivan, a fan of Stone and Parker's other work as well, popularized the term South Park Republican to describe himself and other like-minded fiscal conservatives, social libertarians. Parker himself is a registered libertarian. Before the film's release, it was criticized by Matt Drudge and conservative group Move America Forward for mocking the war on terror. And of course, you're going to get all that stuff. I actually thought it was that was something that should be pointed out too. It does skewer both the left and the right.
Yeah.
As far as it doesn't pick one side or the other and says that one side is right about it and the other side is wrong, which I think is the best thing to do when it comes to movies like this.
Yeah, that's one thing that we've lost, and we could have like a whole hour-long discussion about nuance in art, but like we have completely lost the ability to have nuance. Everything is either good or bad, positive, negative, left or right, whatever. And they refuse to play that game. They have always refused from the beginning, and I'm sure, if we were to watch an episode of South Park right now, they're still refusing to do that.
Yeah. And when they were asked at the time, Anwar Brett of the BBC asked him, for all the targets you choose to take pot shots at, George W. Bush isn't one of them. How come? Matt Stone said, if you want to see Bush bashing in America, you only have to walk about 10 feet to find it. Trey and I are always attracted to what other people aren't doing. Frankly, that wasn't the movie we wanted to make. In another interview, Parker and Stone further clarified the meaning of the film's ending, too, which tries to justify the role of the United States as the world police. They said, because that's the thing that we realized when we were making the movie. It was always the hardest thing. We wanted to deal with this emotion of being hated as an American. That was the thing that was intriguing to us. And having Gary, the main character, deal with that emotion. And so him becoming ashamed to be a part of Team America and being ashamed of himself, he comes to realize that just as he got his brother killed by gorillas, he didn't kill his brother. He was a dick. He wasn't an asshole. So too does America have the role in the world as a dick. Cops are dicks. You fucking hate cops, but you need them. And no matter as crude as that sounds, I think they kind of hit the nail on the head with what they were trying to say with me, because there is a underlying message here in the movie, and that's why I think it works too. Like I said, it'd be easy just to like make something that was grossly offensive without it having any rhyme or reason to what it was doing, and I think it really does. And I think by taking shots at so many different people and so many walks of life, and then not saying the left is right and the right is right, and all that, I think they were able to accomplish what they were trying to do with it.
Yeah.
And like,
and I have a feeling that they would see that National Review top conservative movies of all time thing and just be like, just go smoke a joint and laugh about it. You know what I mean? But I'm sure that they're not wearing that as a feather in their cap. Exactly.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
So compared to like watching it for this and like one of your older viewings, how was it kind of revisiting it and today, and then compared to like how you took it in 20 years ago when you saw it?
I mean, it's so different because of how much the world has changed, but the thing that just made me happy is that even though I have that, that different point of view nowadays as not only the times, but also just an older person now, um, it's still just as funny. And that's what made me really happy about it. It didn't change how funny any of it was. And that's what I was hoping going back into it after all this time. And that does not always happen. There are some older movies that are made in different times that I rewatched them. I'm just like, ugh, God, but
You're like, whoa.
Yeah. But no, this was not that. So
You're like, I used to love this. What happened?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I hadn't watched it in full, and since it came out in theaters, and I was pleasantly surprised about how it held up really well, how the jokes still landed for the most part. Like I said, I thought the script was really smart and has a real sense of actual heart mixed in with all this buffoonery, which also makes the movie work really well too. I love that it doesn't take one side on the the political satire of it too, and also like if you're not watching this just as political satire, like I said, it lampoons so many aspects of of the industry and everything. So there's a lot to take away from the movie. I think based on if you just see the title or whatever, if you're think who Trey Parker and Matt Stone is, that you might think this is something that it isn't, or that they might try to make a movie that is an attack on one walk of life, but it really isn't. For anyone that hasn't seen it, it really is all reaching, and everyone gets their due here. And I think it kind of shows that like everyone is a bit flawed and there's work to be done, which is why it's easy to kind of make fun and poke fun at
Yes.
all these different walks of life and political beliefs and all that. So I think creatives like them do the best they can to address issues like this through their writing, through comedy. It's not going to save the world by any means, but I think it gives all people a little bit of an outlet to be like, oh, that's kind of how I kind of feel, and
Hmm.
at least I can get that out through humor a bit.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's the best way to get it out sometimes, because there is a place for like a politically charged drama, right? I mean, I could watch that and be like, okay, I see what you're doing. Like, I respect the honesty and the truth behind that, but you're not always going to get your point across to it, because sometimes that might be a bit heavy-handed in the message, because it gets lost, I think, a little
Yeah.
bit, which I think why, like, in horror movies there's so much social commentary in some of those movies, and it's easy to drive that home a bit, because the subject matter might not be all that serious, but they're able to sneak in a little bit of intelligence that speaks on something that is a bit more
Sure.
profound. And I
Yeah.
think that's what this movie does too.
Yeah.
I mean, and like I said, if you want to watch it as something that's purely silly, you can do that too. I mean, I'm sure there are a pocket of the audience that just wants to laugh at how ridiculous it looks and just go with that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, that's the good thing about film. It's all subjective, however you want to enjoy it. Yeah, you have a right to.
Absolutely.
I agree. I know. Any final thoughts you want to give on the movie? You would suggest to anyone that hasn't seen it, how they should go into it? Like, anything you want to throw out there?
I think, like you said, I mean, just know going in that this is it's just got its sights on absolutely everybody and everything, and that's part of that's what you want out of these guys, and that's what I would hope that South Park is still doing. Maybe one of these days I'll catch up with it, but in the meantime, I'm really glad that this held up, and I hope that that new movie that they're making with Kendrick Lamar, I hope that turns into something worthwhile. I have no idea what to expect, but we will see.
Yeah, I'm hoping for the best as well. Well, thank you, David, for joining me for this discussion on Team America World Police. Once again, tell people where they can find your podcast or any. I know you said you work on another one too. So anything that you want to plug, this is your time to plug as much as you want.
Right on, right on. Well, yeah, you can find Piecing It Together on all of the podcast apps and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod. You can also find Awesome Movie or wherever you find Piecing It Together. I also have a Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces, where we continue the conversation about any movies we talk about on the show. And it's a fun community of movie lovers to come just talk movies. You could find out about all the live shows that I'm doing at my website, piecingpod.com, or on any of my socials. And also check out my music. Bydavidrosen.com is where you can find links to everything. But check me out, David Rosen, on Spotify, Apple Music, all those kinds of places as well. And yeah, I think that would kind of cover the bases there. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Oh, no problem. And the links for all of these will be posted at the bottom of the description of this episode, so you guys can easily find all of David's stuff. And given the conversation, I would love to have David back on again to talk about any movie that he wanted to discuss. Whether he picks it, sometimes I might have a movie. I'm like, hey, I think it'd be fun to discuss it with you, and if you be down to talk about it, sometimes that's how the show works too. So definitely would love to have you back on anytime that you were willing to be back on, because
sounds like a plan, and maybe we'll get you on Piecing It Together sometime.
Yeah, for sure. I love when like the guests make the conversation easy and there's no like awkward pauses or anything like that. And so this was a good one. I really had fun and enjoyed this one, and thank you for allowing me to revisit a movie I hadn't watched in full in 20 years. It was great to like catch up with it again.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was really happy to get back into this one too.
Yeah. And if you are looking for Back to the Blockbuster or Back to the Blockbuster Presents Deep Dives, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods. Those are all really great. But since Playlist is our podcast network, we would love for you to find us on the Playlist Studio app, which you can get at the iOS Store or the Google Play Store if you have one of those pesky Samsung phones. You can also find us on YouTube if you want to see some of our handsome mugs instead of just listening to us. You can subscribe to the YouTube page, Back to the Blockbuster, as well. On the main show we have coming up, we're going to have a big discussion about San Diego Comic-Con, because I was just there. Unfortunately, my co-host Jackson could not attend, so I sadly will make him feel jealous as I talk about all the things I saw at Comic-Con. And then, of course, in the main show, we have more anniversary episodes on the way for True Lies and American Pie. And then we will also be revealing our anniversary episodes for August. As far as the deep dives, we have The Prestige coming up in a couple of weeks. And I believe someone wants to do Parasite. So that'll be a lot of fun too. So the great thing about the Deep Dive Show, it's so many different types of movies. One week you can get Batman, Massive Phantasm, or Team America World Police, or The Prestige, or Igby Goes Down. That happens too. There's so many different types of movies to deep dive. That's what makes it so fun, and that's what makes the Deep Dive Show so unique, because we get to deep dive into any movie that anyone wants to dive into, no matter what the genre or the decade. Movies are just fun to talk about. So thank you again, David, for joining us on this one. Hope to have you on again soon. And until next time, guys.